Hello, good day. This session will be on dealing with the elderly, and I am Dr. Eileen Pascual, your lecturer for today's session. At the end of this session, you should be able to apply the general principles in dealing with elderly patients using the biopsychosocial approach, describe the implications of a growing elderly population, describe the general principles in caring for the elderly, enumerate the issues involving the elderly and their families, appreciate the different legislative acts related to elderly care. Looking at this slide, we see that the Philippine population has been steadily increasing through the years. Based on the latest, the 2020 census, the projected population by the year 2025 is around 114 million. The Philippine mid-year population is projected to reach 138.67 million by the year 2055. The proportion of elderly population relative to our general population is also increasing from 7.5% in 2015 to 8.5% in 2020. This is due to the fact that the projected life expectancy has also been increasing. According to the United Nations, the life expectancy in the Philippines is 79.71 years, which increased from 71.41 in 2021. The projected life expectancy is increasing. People are living longer due to healthier lifestyles and the advances in medical science. So, how is the aging situation globally? In 2020, the number of people aged 60 years and older outnumbered children younger than 5 years old. Between 2015 and 2050, the proportion of the world's population over 60 years will nearly double from 12% to 22%. In 2050, 80% of older people will be living in low and middle income countries. Maybe you're wondering why a session on dealing with the elderly is included in this module. Of all conditions that have been discussed these past few days, musculoskeletal conditions in the elderly, such as degenerative osteoarthritis, is something that all of us will eventually experience at a certain point in our lives. A growing elderly population will therefore require more multi specialty and coordinated care. They suffer from both degenerative and communicable diseases due to decline in physiologic function. It will also translate to increased utilization of health services. Community services must consider changes in physical structures and processes to accommodate the elderly. Examples would be installation of ramps, toilet grab bars, priority lines, and the like. Aging populations will challenge healthcare and social systems all over the world. So let's have an example. Mr. Z is an 80-year-old male who lives in a one-bedroom house within the family compound. He consults the clinic for intermittent dizziness. He feels that he needed to catch himself shortly after standing. He would sometimes feel unsteady while walking. One of his close friends recently fell and has been in the hospital for several weeks. He's fearful about falling and becoming a burden to his family. In caring for Mr. Z, the following principles must be considered. First, the impact of decreased physiologic reserve. Next, the importance of functional and cognitive status. Next would be using goals of care and prognosis in clinical decision making. Next would be the social context of care. And lastly, the impact of multiple conditions and medications and settings of care. Lower physiologic reserve in organ systems of the elderly means that they are at higher risk for rapid decline when sick. There are expected decreases in the following: in muscle mass and strength, bone density, exercise capacity, respiratory function, thirst and nutrition, and the ability to mount an immune response. The functional and cognitive status of the elderly are more accurate predictors of health, morbidity, mortality, and healthcare utilization. Assessment of the cognitive status includes assessment of the following: memory, mental status, decision making ability. The assessment of functional status includes assessment of the following: independence in doing activities of daily living. Diagnostic and therapeutic plans are based on the stated needs and goals of the patient and the patient's caregivers. Identifying surrogate decision makers and planning for advanced directives are important steps that must be taken, especially for those who are critically ill. It is also important to consider the social context of care. We have to consider the patient's family, friends, his community, and take note of the issues and changes in the stages in his family life cycle. Polypharmacy and drug interactions have to be taken note of. Many elderly patients take several maintenance medications for chronic conditions like hypertension and diabetes. Problems related to limitations of mobility. Many elderly patients are prone to falls and other injuries. So, multiple dimensions of care must be taken into account, guided by the patient's goals and prognosis. So these are the guiding principles in caring for the elderly. First, the impact of decreased physiologic reserve, the importance of functional and cognitive status, using goals of care and prognosis in clinical decision making, the social context of care, and lastly, the impact of multiple conditions, medications, and settings of care. The best way to evaluate an elderly patient is by doing a comprehensive geriatric assessment. So, this is a multidimensional interdisciplinary assessment for evaluating the medical, psychological, physical function, and socioeconomic context of the elderly to detect unidentified and potentially reversible problems, and for physicians to develop a coordinated and integrated management plan for treatment and long term care. The comprehensive geriatric assessment includes a medical assessment. So, this includes taking your history and physical examination, making a detailed review of medications, doing your neurological assessment, and nutritional evaluation. The comprehensive geriatric assessment also includes functional assessment. This includes assessment of the ability to perform activities of daily living and assessment of strength, gait, and balance. One of the tools that we use in functional assessment is the CATS Index of Independence in Activities of Daily Living, or the CATS ADL Index. So we would assess patients in terms of eating, dressing, bathing, transferring, toileting, and continence. Another tool that we use in functional assessment would be the Lawton Instrumental Activities of Daily Living, or the IADL scale. So it looks into the following domains: the ability to use the telephone, shopping, food preparation, housekeeping, laundry, mode of transportation, responsibility for own medications, and the ability to handle finances. So, how is it done? So, the patients are assessed whether they can do a task independently or with assistance, or they are completely dependent on another person to do the following tasks. For the assessment of strength, gait, and balance, we use the Tinetti Balance and Gait Assessment tool. And this is how the Tinetti Balance and Gait Assessment tool would look like. There's a series of actions or tasks that the patient would need to do, and then the doctor would just have to rate whether the task is done or not. Common psychological or psychiatric conditions that elderly patients need to be screened for are cognitive impairment, dementia, and depression. So the tools that we use would be the mini mental state examination and the geriatric depression scale. And here is how it looks like. The mini mental state examination is a series of questions and tasks that the patient would need to do, while the geriatric depression scale is a series of questions to be answered by yes or no. Social assessment would include assessment of the living situation and the support network of our elderly patients. So, this would include assessing for financial stressors, caregiver concerns, and most importantly, assessing for threats or abuse. Social assessment includes assessment of the family situation. So you would have to review your tools in family assessment to be able to do this. So let's have an example. This is the Santos family. Please take note of the index patient and who are the members of the household in this family. Okay, I hope you remember the genogram in the previous slide. So, who is the index patient? The index patient is patient A. The family structure is a unilaterally extended family, and the stage in the family life cycle would be the family in later years. Okay, so what are the issues that a family from launching to retirement and later years would encounter? So, first, you have the emptiness syndrome. So, the children are getting married and moving out of the house. Next would be multi generational households. Children getting married and then never moving out of the house, meaning grandparents living with the children and grandchildren. We also have custodial parenting or surrogate parenthood, which is common among OFW families. Children live with their grandparents while their parents work abroad. Let's have another case scenario. So, this is the lifeline of Maria, a 60-year-old patient. So it starts when she was 14, when her parents legally separated. At 16, she eloped with her boyfriend after graduating from high school. 17 to 18, she got pregnant and gave birth. At 24, she asked for support from her father and went back to college. At the age of 27, she went abroad. She left her daughter with her mother. At 35, she met one, got married, went back to the Philippines, and took care of her mother. At 42, she gave birth to a daughter with developmental problems. And at 60, she starts consulting due to insomnia and anxiety, and she worries taking care of her mother, husband, and daughter. The previous slide illustrates one of the common issues that we have in elderly patients. So we do have the sandwich generation, so which is actually middle-aged adults aged 40s to 50s, caring for both elderly parents and their children. We also have the club sandwich generation, where you have the young old, those who are aged 60s to 70s, taking care of the old parents, meaning the parents who are aged 80s to 90s. They also take care of their children and their grandchildren. So, issues in this stage of the family life cycle include the following: so, mental health and well being, independence, and of course, access to health care. This stage in the family life cycle is more intense and sometimes difficult emotional process for the elders and their families. Unresolved conflicts between husband and wife, parent and child would often resurface during very stressful situations. And it highlights family dynamics, loyalties, obligations, and responsibilities. So, can you imagine if there is conflict between a child and the parent that stems from adolescence and how it would resurface later on when the parents need to be taken care of by the son or the daughter was rebellious during adolescence. So those kinds of issues would sometimes come out when the parents become elderly parents. And because of such issues, decision making regarding medical care or placement of frail elders is often a highly emotional process, especially for dysfunctional families or families in conflict. So, how do we actually interview or interact with the patient and his or her family in a clinical consultation? So, in interviewing the elderly and their families, you have to be prepared to spend more time with older patients and to pace the interview more slowly. Always address the patient first. Do not address the companion, the daughter, or the caregiver. Always direct your conversation to the patient first. And next, you have to involve caregivers and family members early in the patient's care. Even if the patient seems to be independent with everything that he or she does, you have to involve family members early on. You also have to recognize the emotional concerns underlying any explicit requests from your patients because, for all you know, these concerns or these requests might be some sort of escape from the family member or from the current condition inside the house. And lastly, do not make significant changes in the treatment plan based solely on the family's report without evaluating the elderly patient directly. So you do have to verify what is happening with your patient before making any decisions regarding the care of this patient. Do not base any information on just the word of a companion or the word of a caregiver. So you do need to verify with other reliable family members or by doing a home visit. A very important aspect in caring for the elderly would be evaluating caregiver burden. And these are the factors that affect caregiver burden or factors to take note of in evaluating caregiver burden. So, first would be the nature of illness. Of course, trust and dependability, the availability of resources, the history of relationship of the caregiver and the patient, and current family dynamics, and lastly, the support network of the caregiver. So let's look at the different predictors of caregiver burden. First would be the patient. If the patient is demented or disruptive and is highly dependent on the caregiver. Other predictors of caregiver burden would also include if the caregiver feels guilty about anger and resentment towards the patient, if the caregiver had a conflictual relationship with the patient before the illness, and of course, if the caregiver does not understand much about the patient's problems or conditions. The likelihood of caregiver burden is also increased when the caregiver has his or her own illness and disability, or if the caregiver is depressed, isolated, or lonely, if the caregiver has poor relationships with other family members, and if the caregiver has little personal time away from caregiving. The likelihood of caregiver burden is also increased when the family denies the patient's diagnosis. And if the family leaves most of the caregiving to just one person, or if the family is in conflict, or the members of the family are in conflict with one another, if there's few financial resources within the family, and of course, when the family has conflictual relationships with the medical providers or the medical team. The likelihood of caregiver burden is also increased when the community does not have adult daycare programs or respite care. If there are no family psychoeducation and support groups, and if there's no psychological and family therapy services. The primary caregivers of elderly chronically ill patients are often silent patients. It is also important to screen and assess them for caregiver burden and strain. And one of the tools that can be used is the Modified Caregiver Strain Index. And there is a Filipino version that has been validated in our local setting. Now let's look at the settings for elderly care. Placing the elderly in nursing homes is not a very popular decision among Filipino households. However, there are situations where this decision is inevitable. Some elderly patients refuse to move in with their families, and some simply do not have children or relatives who are capable of taking them into their own households. The decision to place elderly patients in nursing homes should always consider the patient's and the family's healthcare and personal needs. There should always be a balance between the two. Here are some questions that can guide patients and their families in making that decision. Number one, who thinks that the elder needs to move to an alternative facility or to have alternative living arrangements and why? Next, why is the issue being raised now? So, what has been happening? Why is there a need for the elderly to be placed in an assisted living facility? Number three, what are the patient's and family's expectations for the alternative housing? Number four, what needs would be met that cannot be met by the current living arrangements? And number five, what pressures are the patient and family experiencing? So these are some of the questions that you can discuss with the family and the patient in trying to decide whether it is the right decision to move the elderly in an assisted living facility. Here are a few examples of assisted living facilities for the elderly in Metro Manila. I've had the privilege of visiting a couple of them, and these are the facilities that provide 24-hour nursing care with personnel that are trained to deal with the elderly. They have daily activities that keep the elderly physically active and cognitive activities that help with their mental function. These are some examples of non-profit facilities for the elderly. Most of the residents would be the elderly who have been abandoned by their own families. Now, let's look at how the government has institutionalized its response to the growing elderly population through the years. First, we have Republic Act number 344 of the Accessibility Law of 1982. So this provided for the minimum requirements and standards to make buildings, facilities, and utilities for public use accessible to persons with disabilities, including older persons who are confined to wheelchairs and those who have difficulty in walking or climbing stairs, among others. So this is the reason why we have ramps, why we have steel bars where elderly people can hold on to while walking. Republic Act number 7432, which was enacted in 1992. This is an act to maximize the contribution of senior citizens to nation building, grant benefits, and special privileges, and for other purposes. So, this defined the benefits and privileges of senior citizens and established the Office of Senior Citizens Affairs, or OSCA. RA number 9257 or the Expanded Senior Citizens Act of 2003. This expanded the coverage of benefits and privileges that the elderly may acquire, including medically necessary services. Because of that law, senior citizen discounts and VAT exemptions now cover the following. So, medicine, medical supplies and equipment, medical and dental services in private facilities, professional fees of attending physicians and licensed health workers, domestic air and sea travel fare, public land transportation fare, hotels, restaurants, recreation centers, places of leisure, and even funeral and burial services. Senior citizen benefits now also cover the following. So you have retirement benefits, express lanes in government and commercial establishments. Now almost all of the groceries have elderly or special lanes for the elderly, PWDs for pregnant women. Discounts on utilities, discounts on certain groceries, vehicle coding exemptions, and free parking in some cities. In Quezon City, parking would always be free for senior citizens, scholarships, financial assistance in public and private schools. Republic Act number 9994, or the Expanded Senior Citizens Act of 2010, introduced free vaccination against the influenza virus and pneumococcal diseases for indigent senior citizens. RA number 10155, or the General Appropriations Act of 2012, mandates that all government agencies and instrumentalities should allocate 1% of their total budget to programs and projects for older persons and persons with disabilities. So this ensures that programs and projects for the elderly would actually have an allocated budget from these government agencies. Republic Act number 10645, which was enacted in 2014, ensured that all senior citizens will be covered by the National Health Insurance Program, or PhilHealth. Republic Act number 10868, or the Centenarians Act of 2016, has institutionalized the cash gift of the government to elderly people turning 100 years old. It also includes a letter of greeting signed by the president. RA number 11350, enacted in 2018, which is the National Commission of Senior Citizens Act. This has created the National Commission for Senior Citizens, or the NCSC, which will be under the Office of the President. This commission is tasked to ensure the full implementation of laws, policies, and programs of the government pertaining to senior citizens. Republic Act number 11982, which was signed into law last February 2024, is the expanded Centenarian Act. So this institutionalized the cash gift of 10,000 pesos to an elderly citizen upon reaching the age of 80 years old and every 5 years until the age of 95. Joint Administrative Order 2402, Series of 2024, was signed by the Department of Trade and Industry, the Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Energy last March 2024. This joint administrative order increases the special discount for senior citizens and PWDs on basic necessities and prime commodities ranging from food to LPG, kerosene, charcoal, and housing materials from 65 pesos a week to 125 pesos a week, subject to review every 5 years. There are also non government organizations who advocate for the rights and privileges of the elderly. So, this would include the Coalition of Services for the Elderly Incorporated and the Federation of Senior Citizens Associations in the Philippines. As you can see, there have been active efforts from the government to institutionalize its response to address the welfare of the elderly. So let's continue to be vigilant in monitoring that these would be implemented so that the elderly population would be taken care of, especially the disadvantaged ones, so that they may remain active members of our society. So I will close this session with these verses. First, I am a child to my parent. Then I am a parent to my child. Then I am a parent to my parent. Finally, I am a child to my child. So this ends our session for today. For questions, comments, and other concerns, please feel free to email me at abpascual@ateneo.edu.ph or send a telegram message to me at abpascual. Thank you.